Hey everybody, it's been a pretty crazy roller coaster year for the Montreal Canadiens, so I figured since it's December 31st, we should likely do a year in review for the Montreal Canadiens and look ahead to some bold predictions for the 2022 season for the Habs. Just start off, Marc Bergevin, the Montreal Canadiens general manager, went all in for the Habs last season, signed Josh Anderson, made some big moves like Tyler Toffoli in free agency, Jake Allen as well. This is the type of season the Montreal Canadiens were going all in for Carey Price, for Shea Weber to try to win a Stanley Cup, and they did make that dream come to fruition, but they just didn't get the whole way through. They made it to the Stanley Cup Final where they took on the Tampa Bay Lightning, but let's rewind a little bit and talk about how they got to that point, because it was a very crazy season for the Montreal Canadiens with lots of roller coaster rides along the way. To say the last year was a weird one for the National Hockey League would be an understatement. The Montreal Canadiens were placed in an all-Canadian division with the 6 other Canadian teams, and it was an interesting experiment to say the least. It was fun to start off with, but playing the same 6 teams over and over again got a little tiresome towards the end of the season. No real rivalries were formed in that stretch, and it just became kind of tiresome towards the end of that season. But then the Montreal Canadiens went into the playoffs as big, massive underdogs against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they were down 3-1 in that series and came all the way back to force a Game 7 and ultimately win that series. And I think a lot of the Montreal Canadiens, if you look deep into the core of that team, whether it's Carey Price, Shea Weber at the time, and those veteran players like Corey Perry, Eric Staal, this was a veteran-led team, and I think a lot of those veterans really pushed them over the top and pushed them to that Stanley Cup Final, which they ultimately competed in. Now, the Montreal Canadiens may not have gotten the storybook ending that they wish they had in that Stanley Cup Final against the Tampa Bay Lightning, where they ultimately fell in 5 games, but there were so many memories created during that Stanley Cup playoff run last year, and the one that stuck out to me the most was Artturi Lehkonen's Game 6 overtime winner to send the Habs to their first Stanley Cup Final since 1993 on St. John Baptiste Day in Montreal. It just was the epitome of what it means to be a Montreal Canadiens fan. You look at all the hard work and dedication that went into that playoff run. Artturi Lehkonen was the perfect guy to score that overtime winner, and I just haven't experienced something like that as a Montreal Canadiens fan, and it really sent us over the top and gave us that feeling of competing for the Stanley Cup where the Montreal Canadiens belong. And I really think that Artturi Lehkonen and that moment will live forever in the Montreal Canadiens' glory. Now, it would be weird not to talk about the legacies of Carey Price and Shea Weber here, because they were big parts of the Montreal Canadiens playoff run last season. You look at Carey Price, he had such a phenomenal playoff run with the Montreal Canadiens last year, and I think a lot of that stems from him being a big game goaltender. We know his struggles have been like over the last few years in the regular season, but Carey Price has always come to play in those big games, and he did so once again in the 2021 playoff run for the Habs. And you look at Shea Weber, the warrior, the veteran presence on the back end for the Habs, and although we're likely not going to see him ever lace them up again for the Habs due to injuries, I really think Shea Weber was fantastic during that playoff run for the Montreal Canadiens, and I think a lot of credit goes out to the veteran for playing through the pain and all the details that he went through during that run. I just don't think a lot of people realize all the pain and other stuff that Shea Weber was dealing with. I think it was very commendable for him to play and be a very reliable leader for this Habs team towards the young players that they've seen, whether it's Nick Suzuki, Cole Caulfield. Then after the roller coaster ride that was the regular season and the playoff run that the Montreal Canadiens went through, you went on to see Shea Weber likely never suiting up again for the Montreal Canadiens due to injuries. And I really believe that was kind of the move that set the Montreal Canadiens back a long time, because the Montreal Canadiens relied so much upon Shea Weber, and I don't even think people like myself realized how valuable Shea Weber was to this Montreal Canadiens team. But looking at the presence that he provided for the Habs, it's just not one that's replaceable, and the Montreal Canadiens clearly proved that with their early season struggles before all the other injuries hit during this season. And I think that Shea Weber is going to be a veteran presence still in this organization, whether it's in a scouting role or a leadership role. Then in continuation with the offseason, there was plenty more drama surrounding the Montreal Canadiens, where Jesperi Kotkaniemi was ultimately offer sheeted by the Carolina Hurricanes, and the Montreal Canadiens chose not to match that offer sheet and let him go for a first-round pick and a third-round pick in terms of compensation. And the Montreal Canadiens ultimately flipped the first-round pick to Arizona for Christian Dvorak, and I really don't think we're giving Christian Dvorak the benefit of the doubt here. I think he's going to be a very solid tweener, whether it's a second line or a third line center for the Montreal Canadiens. He wasn't exactly put in a position to succeed right off the bat for this team, and I think we'll see a better Dvorak in the coming seasons. But back to the Kotkaniemi offer sheet, a lot of it stems from the Montreal Canadiens' issue with the salary cap and being able to hold on to that $6.1 million this season and the qualifying offer in the next season after that. But looking back on it, I know hindsight is 2020, but the Montreal Canadiens might have been better off agreeing to sign that offer sheet that Jesperi Kotkaniemi signed and matching that contract, because the Montreal Canadiens are in a position now where they get the chance to develop some players because of how the season has gone. And maybe Jesperi Kotkaniemi wouldn't be doing so well in that role with the Habs, but he isn't exactly lighting the world on fire with the Carolina Hurricanes either. So I really think this could have been a good development opportunity for the Habs with Kotkaniemi. But like I said, hindsight is 2020. And then, of course, you have to look at Marc Bergevin being fired as general manager of the Montreal Canadiens. Jeff Gordon ultimately being his replacement as the president of hockey operations, despite not really being his title. That's exactly the role he's going to play for the Montreal Canadiens moving forward here. And whoever he does decide to be the general manager will still play a role in the hockey operations department. But I really think this is going to be Gordon's team, and I'm excited to see what he puts together and the future of what he is going to do with this Montreal Canadiens team, which I presume will ultimately be in direction of a rebuild. Anyways, that's a lot of me talking today. I'm going to end this video with two random bold predictions for the Montreal Canadiens over the next calendar year. Number one is that the Montreal Canadiens will pick in the top 5 of the 2022 NHL draft in Montreal, and they will select defenseman Simon Nemec from Slovakia. I really think this is the prototypical defenseman of the modern day NHL, and Jeff Gordon likes to build his teams from the blue line out, so I really do believe this will be a solid pick for the Montreal Canadiens if they do indeed end up in the top 5 of the lottery. And the last bold prediction I have for you at this time is that the Montreal Canadiens will move Brendan Gallagher, whether it's at the trade deadline or during next offseason, and the Montreal Canadiens will have a new leadership core heading into next season that will likely be headlined by Nick Suzuki and potentially some other veterans as well. I just don't believe Brendan Gallagher is going to be a fixture in terms of what the Montreal Canadiens want to do moving forward if they do indeed go the direction of a rebuild. And I think Brendan Gallagher deserves a shot at winning a Stanley Cup, and he's not exactly getting any younger, so you have to capitalize on what trade value, if any, that he still has left at this point, because we know what his contract situation is. I'm not sure a lot of teams are going to want to take on that deal, even if the Montreal Canadiens do retain some of that salary. That's it for me today from Cook's Corner. Before we go, I want to wish a happy new year to all of my subscribers. I want to wish everyone the best heading into the next year, which hopefully will be a much brighter one for the Montreal Canadiens. I'm Zach Cook. We'll see you later.